Let's move into this Aubrey Marcus situation. Let's give some insight and opinions into what this conversation is that's taking place right now in various corners, let's say, of the wellness biz, the wellness paradigm. I first became aware of Aubrey Marcus and his podcast maybe like 3 or so years ago, and it just came up in the algorithm. I think he was talking about an ayahuasca ceremony with some guest on his podcast. And so that, of course, brought in more videos. And at that time, there was this miraculous celebration around the union of his wife, Vailana, him and Vailana. And what I gathered from the material that I took in was that he and Vailana at certain points had gone through different polyamorous explorations and experiences. And now they were in this very divine, sacred union as a monogamous couple. At one point, I remember seeing an interview with another couple who I think also had a similar pattern. And they seemed to acknowledge plant medicine, the path of plant medicine, and ayahuasca as something that actually gave them more support in their monogamy, meaning that the intelligence of the plant is literally saying you need to be monogamous. If you're going to walk, this is what is beneficial. And all of them were, very much embracing this lifestyle. That was as deep as I fell into that corner of the internet. I did see, and the algorithm was trying to give me all of the other people. There's all these different people in their bubble that are creating a certain frequency online, and you can see there's a lot of cross-pollination and support, and they're traveling the world together, and they are, doing each other's podcasts, and they're a little community that exists in this pocket of life. And I'm sure that they have amassed a lot of followers and people that look to them. I just want to make it clear that I do not hold them on any type of pedestal as spiritual gurus. I've heard this being passed around that he apparently, some people have that projection of him, and maybe even her, and maybe even some of these other characters that are kind of in that bubble, that field. So I was never really triggered by them. The way that I received what I was receiving was that Aubrey Marcus was into polyamory. He went through a huge shift, fell in love with this beautiful woman, Vailana, and actually uplifted Vailana. Vailana is now known as a sound healer. Probably, maybe she calls herself a medicine woman. I don't know. But she is being platformed. They're platforming each other as these, really powerfully evolved human beings in this very sacred union and relationship. And for me, I just never really bought into it. I mean, what is happening in their relationship, I don't really care, right? I have no investment there. Looking at Vailana, I could see that she's at the very beginning. She's at the very beginning of her consciousness awakening, and she is partnered with this person who has a very powerful platform. And now she is empowered and he is empowered, and the topic is empowering them both, meaning their projection is getting stronger and they're amassing more people coming into whatever it is that they are projecting. And it's not to say that what they are projecting is not their truth. It is. And so here we are at this moment in time around their relationship, where now this announcement has been made and this story has been shared about how they are now receiving a third person in their monogamous relationship. This is very triggering for humanity right now. It's very triggering for people who are deeply dedicated to working out the issues that arise in a monogamous relationship. And it seems that the internet is, just a little bit bummed out because they're trying to gaslight everyone into believing that they are in a monogamous relationship, even though there is now a third person in that experience. So it's looking a little funny to people, and people are reacting to this. It took me a while to get through this podcast. The things that stood out, my takeaways: one, the framing of purity and understanding that, well, one, it's giving Handmaid's Tale. It's giving Sydney Sweeney in The Handmaid's Tale, when the veil is lifted and you see just this innocent young woman, fertile and available to be the birthing vessel, and glowing and light and innocent, and just, nothing, there's no depth there. There's no experience there. And this is not to insult this woman, Alana, who is the third person. And by the way, like, they want you to know this person's name, so they're prepping her for something. The same way that Vailana, came onto the scene as this amazing sound healer that no one had ever heard of before in the wellness world, in the world of sound healing. It's like very LA, very, sort of Hollywood, like, oh, I have this platform and I am this big sound healer. It's like, what masters had she really studied with at that point to step into that and take that on? And that was my thinking. Like, I'm not gonna fall to my knees and just believe you are you because it is the internet. Like, you're not talking about, your teachers or your lineage. You apparently you come from Hawaii and you have this connection. But at the time that, like, she was platformed, I didn't really see any of that. What you can see when you look back, and especially when you look at this interview, is that this young woman, Alana, looks closer to how Vailana looked 3 or 4 years ago when that content was fresh on the scene, and what Vailana looks like now. And then we're not talking about physical, like, it is a bit physical, but when you look at Vailana in comparison, because we're going to compare, we want to look and analyze and understand, why is this energy of this young maiden coming into the picture? And what is she entering into? And when you look at Vailana and you study, right, the energy, and of course, hands down, she's going through a process. And she's going through a process that is not light. She's going through a very heavy emotional process. She talks in this interview about having to die again and again and again, right? That's her belief system, her perspective, her values, her morals, like, something in there that has to die in order for her to expand into this new relationship. Aubrey is not going through that experience of death and transformation. He's getting what he wants, which is the fair, innocent maiden. He's getting the handmaid, because Isis also spoke to him and said that he is supposed to have children with both of these women. And it's also very interesting that he hasn't had a child with Vailana, who he's been with for 7 years. And now he wants to, right? He's being pulled to this very fertile young vessel. When I look at Vailana in this podcast, yes, I see the process that she's living through, so that is there, and I can kind of push that aside. But what I also see is a very powerful woman, much more empowered than she was when I first viewed her. I see her being more centered, stronger, more knowing who she is and what she wants in life. And I had a couple of thoughts around what might actually be going on beneath the surface. And if we can put ourselves in Aubrey Marcus's shoes, if we dare, um, you have this fair maiden, and just you can look at her, but listen to the sound of her voice in that podcast. Listen to how delicate her speaking is, and listen to how she kind of resonates and responds to the different points that are being made throughout their discussion. There is even one moment where Aubrey describes her as having sugar glider energy, which a sugar glider is like a tiny little pet animal that a lot of people get for emotional comfort. So they have this like something that is very close to them. And he was saying something about the way that she snuggles in bed and this, and you can just see it. You can see that attraction, that it is really about that innocence and that purity. And they have this whole dialogue around purity. And what is, let's say, the opposite of purity would be impure, not necessarily something that you have to be shameful of or shaming around your, oh, I'm so impure. But the way I see it in this podcast is that you have a woman who is now more lived, and you have a woman who has less lived, who is obviously younger, not just younger in age, but younger in the relationship to this man. This man has 7 years with this woman who is becoming deeply empowered, who is going through all of these different processes with this man to expand her boundaries, to expand and empower the relationship. And she's got some confidence, and she's got some things to say, and she knows who he is, and she knows his bullshit, and she is going to call him out on those things, and she is going to challenge him, and she's going to grow. And you know what? She's also not leaving, right? Like, he's not getting rid of her anytime soon. They are married, and she is not running out the door when this third person is coming in. So she is there, right? And there's something to be said for that, or to at least, meditate on that. And now his energy is moving towards this young, virtuous, innocent maiden, not to devalue her complexities or her strength and who she is. I'm sure all of that is in there. In the relationship to the relationship, it is new, it is fresh, it is not that challenging. It is open, it's expansive, it's love, it's romance. And on this side, you have a woman who is going through processes, and she understands her process, and she's becoming more empowered, and she's growing, she's aging, she's becoming more wise, she's becoming less fresh, less sparkly, less new in the field. And again, it's not to diminish that she can't be fresh or sparkly or, any of these things, and she can be that. But to him, and in that relationship, thus the challenge, I would say, of being in a long-term partnership is that the freshness falls away, right? And the whole idea around monogamy, the way that I view it, the way that I've seen it played out in the very successful relationships of many couples that I know personally, there's a rising above, there's a certain level of acceptance, and you could even say maturity, that, the man is there to also age in experience and in reality with his wife and his partner. And I think also it's very important to know that this Aubrey and Vailana, they don't have any children. And it could be a very different experience if they have children. What I've seen is that the children become the focus and the sexual experience is less, right? It's less of a it's less about the two of them and it's more about the family that they are creating. So there are sacrifices and there are compromises. I do think that it's completely possible for a married couple to have a wonderful, sexual, romantic, beautiful, balanced relationship, also having children. I think that any relationship takes work and choices and compromise. I do think that all is possible. I think that couples also need a lot of help and a lot of support. And I think families need a lot of help and a lot of support. What we see in this podcast, what we understand through what they are sharing, my perception is that Aubrey Marcus is very much attached to his sensual pleasures. And that is where he is doing the work of his life, which is very interesting to think about when certain people are maybe locked into him as some type of guru or some type of, a person who's like espousing spiritual wisdom, right? So it's an interesting reveal for the wellness industry and hopefully for a lot of people to wake up and understand that this is just a human that's living his human experience. And his human experience is lower chakra. It's all lower chakra because he has the means to stay there, right? He has a lot of money, he has a big platform. It's not to say that he doesn't have a big heart or he's not a good person or a good human being. I'm sure he is all of that. But the nature of his life path, right? It's all about pushing the boundaries and riding up into that edge of discomfort and taking on these initiations to gain something and to expand his awareness and to empower his being. And this couple, this Vailana, Aubrey, this Alana woman, this doctor that's there, and the doctor is like, we will circle back on that. These are people that are, I would say, probably sex centric and relational centric beings. This is something that we want to understand when we are coming into someone's field, right? And we look at them as like a potential teacher or somebody that we can benefit from. What is the centricity in their life, right? If you want to learn to play an instrument, you're going to go to a teacher that understands that instrument or a musician that understands it, and they can give you the technique. And generally speaking, that instrument or that music is the centricity of that person's life, right? They are devoted to the piano. They are piano centric. They are music centric. They're all about performing, great piano songs. And this is the centricity. In my own world, I am centered on the spirit. I love spiritual practices. I love spiritual disciplines. I love spiritual philosophies. Like it's centric to that. There are many people here in this location that are sex centric. They call themselves tantrikas. They do these tantric temples. They're big into expanding their capacity to love more than one person at a time. They're expanding their capacity to be in very triggering, vulnerable situations through relational experiences, whether it is sexually relational or just deeply intimate and personal. And they are working in this capacity. This is where they are finding their spiritual awakening and their spiritual path. We can judge it, right? We can sit here. I can sit here as like somebody that's on more of a pure spiritual path and say, bad things about them, but that's a waste of time, right? What it feels like and what it looks like to me is that these people that are sex centric and relational centric, they're really stuck in their lower chakras. It doesn't mean that they're not open in their heart or have beautiful visions and beautiful minds, but there's something here. When you listen to the sound current of this doctor that's kind of facilitating this whole charade, is what it kind of feels like at the end. I mean, they literally take out the book that he has written, that Aubrey Marcus has given the forward on. They literally like showcase this book in the midst of this like grand traumatic reveal. And it's just a little bit too constructed, and it feels very like it's not connected to the heart. You want us to believe that it is, because Vailana is over there crying, and the young maiden is like so sweet, and it's this whole thing, and they're sharing their process. But the whole thing is platforming this book that they want people to buy, and their whole process, it seems to be that their process is based on the teachings of this rabbi. I think he's a rabbi. But if you just listen to the sound current of this doctor, it's very difficult to hear him. It's not connected to the heart. He's super mental, but it's lower. It's lower vibration. So when I see these people that are more sex centric, it makes sense. Like, what I'm feeling makes sense, that it's not that you're a bad person or that you're deeply disconnected from your heart. It's that you're really swimming down here. You're stuck in the sex, money, survival story. And even though, right, these people apparently are very abundant, right? Where's their abundance coming from? It's coming from these stories of relation. It's coming from these stories that allude to, right, whatever's happening in the bedroom and what they're allowing in and what they're expanding into. And all of that is low. It's a lower vibration. It doesn't mean that they're bad or that they're necessarily nefarious. Some people do think that they are pushing an agenda to convince people that you can now, and I think this is why it's so triggering, right? Because if you're in a monogamous relationship and your boyfriend or your husband is seeing this podcast and seeing this young, fair handmaiden coming in, right? Of course, like the wife, as the woman, you want to protect that relationship. And this is, I think, where it gets a little more complex, and it's something that the internet isn't really talking about right now, which is, what is Vailana's position here, really? And it's like, not to be rude, not to be hurtful. I am older than Vailana. So what I see in Vailana is a woman who is understanding that she is aging. Yeah, big topic, right? How we age as women, and our independence and our capacity to support ourselves and our capacity to stand alone. And I think that if she wanted to break away from this relationship, she would probably be fine, right? She's a beautiful young woman with vision and empowerment and a deep understanding of who she is. My feeling on it is, one, they've already spent 7 years investing into this relationship. 7 years of many different experiences and layers and level of connection and depth and resonance. I would think after 7 years that would be very difficult to just detach and let go of. And she is on a path, they are on a path of writing out the discomfort, they're in a path where when they've gone through similar challenges, it's taken them into a new level of understanding and a new level of connection within the relationship. I imagine that this is probably the most challenging so far and the most painful, but she is not a woman that shies away from a challenge or pain. She's a woman who has gone through these different types of processes, and to some degree, she has benefited, and it's been put into her character, and she's using it for some type of empowerment in her work and in her walk. And she is aging. She is not the fair, sparkly skin, naive maiden that she was at the beginning of her journey when they were so in love and so monogamous and so committed and so fertile in their romance. She is moved into a new chapter. Now, from a woman's psyche, right? She could see the fair maiden and she could be trying to do all of the things that she can do to emulate the fair maiden. And there is a reality that no matter how many mantras you chant, no matter how much, pure service you create, no matter how much, Botox, fillers, surgery, like these things, you really can't compete with a woman who is just there in the timeline of her life. It's just a part of living, it's a part of life. We all get the opportunity to go through that phase, and we all will age out of that phase if we're lucky enough to age on this planet and live a very long life. We all have to, at a certain point, surrender to some degree versus trying to hold on to something that it's in the DNA of being human. It's naturally going to diminish. It doesn't mean to say that you can't cultivate that and build that essence of purity. And I think that that is a very interesting takeaway from this podcast and that dialogue is like, giving some credit to Alana, the third party, because I don't think that she's a dummy by any means. She's putting her full name in the description of the YouTube video, so she wants people to know who she is. I have no idea what her talents are. Maybe she's a musician, maybe she's a sound healer, maybe she's a brilliant philosopher. I have no clue, but they're clearly platforming her to bring her energy forward in this this corner of the internet where, this community is creating this thing. And she, I would think that she understands the power of her own projective purity, right? Because it's a projection of being very pure and innocent. It's not to say that she's making it up, but she's leaning into that projection. Just look at what she looks like. She looks like she's wearing a child's ballet, right? Like what's more innocent than like a ballerina, right? A young ballerina. She's got this like fluffy bottom half. It looks like she has like a ballet type of skirt on and like this little spaghetti strap, like very flat chested. Her skin is glowing. She's got this very innocent type of, and I think they call it virtue, right? They're leaning into like the virtue. Again, it's this like handmaids, but we can see that vibration. We can see the energy behind it, and you can see the magnetism. You can see what she has managed to attract in her life. She's stepping onto a platform that is already very large, right? She has attracted through her projection, through her angelic, pure, virtuous, young maiden, just wants to snuggle and doesn't want to challenge. And is going through some things, but clearly has not gone through a lot of things that women go through. I think she's only 29. So we can look away from that and be triggered by that, or we can actually look at it and say, well, what is she doing through her femininity, through the power of femininity, through the power of evoking this very virtuous spirit? What is she attracting? How is she getting this big, strong, married man to fall to his knees and to make space in his sacred union for her to come in? Very intriguing. I would say don't shy away from it. Look at it and study it, because ultimately, right, it's what we want, not to sabotage somebody else's relationship or to be in like a throuple or anything like that, but to really understand the power of our femininity and the power that we can have over a big, strong man. It's just very fascinating. Vailana, I want to give Vailana the benefit of the doubt that where she is at in her life, she's accepting that the pros outweigh the cons. She could end the relationship, she could walk away, but maybe she's really comfortable. Hey everyone, we had a bit of a technical difficulty. Maybe it was even the goddess Isis herself commanding me to shut down my camera and not release all of the things that I had to say on this very hot topic. If you have any questions, any triggers, anything that you want to share, please feel free to make a comment and we can continue the dialogue. Otherwise, stay blessed and I hope to see you very soon.